It is my honor, privilege, to introduce our speaker for this morning, Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan. Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan is a director of interreligious studies at the Vancouver School of Theology, Rabbi Emerita at Or Shalom Synagogue in Vancouver, and Professor Emerita of Philosophy at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She studied Kabbalah with Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi and the Jewish Renewal Movement, spiritual direction with VST, and Ayurvedic yoga with the New Life Center in Boston. She was named the U.S. Professor of the Year in 1991 by the Carnegie Foundation, and her philosophical books include Philosophy and Everyday Life. And let us give a wonderful unity welcome to Rabbi Laura Duhan Kaplan.
Thank you so much, Roy, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here and warmly welcoming each other and me. It's a treat to be here. The music is so beautiful. Thank you. And thank you, Barb, for the soothing, theologically, full, moving, rich, thank you, meditation. And thanks to all the people who helped me today, Randy, Sophie, Jan, Barb, Brian, Pierre, Roy, Nim. When I saw the sign up that said, volunteer, all we need is you, I was just reminded what a strong community of volunteers you are, and I can feel that in the room. Thank you so much. I will talk a little bit about spirit, so there is a connection between Barb's meditation and some of what I'll talk about. And I will be talking about some ideas that are in my new book, The Infinity Inside, as well as some ideas that are not in the book. And I just want to call your attention to the beautiful cover art that was done by local artist Rodolphe Parfait, who normally works on virtual reality for video games and was kind enough to consent to do a static image for this. And it's worth the price of the book just to have a piece of Rodolphe's art. I'm also very happy that my husband Charles is with us today, particularly as Charles is a character in one of the stories I'm going to tell. And if I misrepresent him, thank you. And I'll start with a story about 2 years ago. Charles and I found ourselves with a day off. A day off from work, a day off from volunteering responsibilities, a day off from family responsibilities. And we wondered, what are we going to do with this day? Where are we going to go? And so we chose Mount Seymour. Mountains, woods, rushing rivers, no cell phone service, no internet access, a different rhythm, and just a short drive away. We parked at a high elevation and hiked down to the river gorge. Many of you will recognize from the descriptions. We went down the Homestead Trail to the Fisherman's Trail. The Homestead Trail led us into dense, damp woods. Spanish moss, mushrooms, black slugs, nurse logs, all under towering old-growth pine and cedar trees. When we breathed, there were deep, quiet, woodsy smells coming from the soft, dark ground. And our thoughts and feelings also became quiet and soft. When we first hit the trail, we fantasized about breaking free of our frenetic life. We would create the family business of our dreams, the easy kind, with all the rewards and very little work. But under the spell of the trees, the spell of the woods, we gradually forgot all the details of our everyday life. And we talked only about what was before us. Leaf, root, rock, creek. Down in the gorge, the river ran fast and loud. We had no need to talk to each other, and even if we had tried, we couldn't hear each other. We went to a pebble beach. We sat on some boulders, and we looked, we listened, we felt, we thought. From my pack, I was prepared for just such a moment. I took out a book of poetry by the medieval Hebrew Spanish poet Solomon ibn Gabirol. And I thought, we have no words, but surely this poetic lover of infinity has the perfect words. And he did. And I translated from the Hebrew. 3 hints together in a single view. In this place I am reminded of you. Under your skies I can recall your name. Forever they bear witness to your fame. The place where I sit awakens my thought. It's vast, but not boundless like you, my Lord. My musings draw my attention inside. My soul does bless you always, Adonai. And the words were perfect, because here we were amid those 3 things. Sky peeking through the trees, opening up over the river, earth green and damp and fragrant, thoughts so calm, flowing with the river. And we were not thinking of God, but we didn't need to think about that, because we had merged, it felt, we had merged with the spirit of the place, feeling ourselves in the one world soul, blessing God simply by being. And the poet Ibn Gabirol would surely say that we were praying. Not with prayers found in any written prayer book. In that moment, we felt that written prayers can only offer concepts about the divine. And our prayer was deeper, more direct. We broke out of our mundane patterns of thought, and we contemplated creation, and we felt the spirit that pulses through it. Spirit, it seemed in that moment, was the experience of being alive. And when I reflect on what I mean by that, I think of spirit as including our emotions, our thoughts, our beliefs, our ideals, our moods, our attitudes, our intuitions, and of course, our sense of the sacred. Sometimes an event will grab our attention and turn it towards spirit. And we call those moments spiritual experiences. experiences that change our consciousness, uplift us, redirect us, inform us. And surely our day on the mountain, close to home as it was, surely that day was a spiritual experience. It was a magical, grace-filled day of higher consciousness. And at the same time, it was not spontaneous. It was actually the fruit of long-term spiritual practice. For many years, we had sought out teachers. We studied hiking. We trekked regularly, and we evolved our own style, which our daughter likes to make fun of by saying, "Oh, look, a rock." We're slow. It has its rewards. But years ago, I hiked with the American Mountain Club, and from experienced teachers, I learned how to stay safe, how to use equipment, how to respect the environment. I read books about ecology and about the spirituality of place. I took classes about sacred land with indigenous teachers. I studied stories about non-human animals in my own scriptural tradition. I prepared for the outdoors. Charles took classes in earth science. He studied orienteering. He learned how to backpack. And before every outing, he studied maps and trail guides so that he could feel the shape of each place. And for 15 years, we walked outdoors in some kind of park almost every weekend. No wonder our daughter was fed up with us. But we did score 100% with our other child. Our son does love the outdoors. But with all this preparation, with all this shaping of our minds and our feeling, it's no wonder that Mount Seymour rewarded us with a mystical experience, because we spent years developing a consciousness that attunes to our surroundings. Would I call it a religious experience? I'm not sure that I would. And to try to explain why I would say that, here's a paraphrase of the sociologist Emile Durkheim's famous definition of religion. Durkheim says, "A religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices about sacred things that unites people into one single community across time and space." A religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices about sacred things that unites people into one single community across time and space. Charles and I practice a religion, and that's Judaism. We have daily Jewish rituals around waking, eating, washing, having our first cup of coffee, and even winding down for bed. And these practices integrate the sacred into everyday life. Our weekly practice of Shabbat sets aside a special time for slowing down and for spiritual reflection. And there are seasonal practices too, as our religious calendar recalls the early start of our religion in an agricultural economy. And these seasonal practices give historical and spiritual meanings to the rhythm of nature. The interpersonal practices of the tradition teach kindness and morality and social justice. And Jews all over the world of whatever denomination practice the basics in similar ways. And we do feel ourselves as a single, though diverse, Jewish community. And when Charles and I meditate down by the Seymour River, we feel part of a worldwide biodiverse community of creatures. And that's a different, much larger community. Judaism, as a religious tradition, designates special days for tuning into the natural environment. There's the holiday of Tu B'Shvat, which simply means the 15th day of the month of Shvat, which is a day for celebrating trees and planting new trees. Sukkot, known in English as Feast of Booths. Sukkot is a week of living outdoors, as our ancestors did in the wilderness. It's a little challenging in the rainforest, but we try. If Charles and I smelled the sweet, damp forest on Tu B'Shvat, the tree holiday, and if we flowed with the river on Sukkot, we would be in sync with the Jewish world, and we would be co-creating Jewish community across time and across space, and we would be doing religion as Durkheim sees it. But if Charles and I only followed the Jewish ritual calendar, we would be spiritually poorer. We would not have become familiar with ecological consciousness to the admittedly limited extent that we are, based on what is possible and how much there is to learn. If we only followed Jewish practice, we might not have sought out scientific and indigenous perspectives on the land. We might not have gone out of our way to learn how to feel with other life forms. We might not have actively set out to seek and find an experience of the world soul. And when the designated holidays of Sukkot and Tu B'Shvat came around, we would not be able to teach about them in any depth because we would not have explored the experiences. And there's even more, a little bit more, that I think we would miss. And that's something I just found the words for a few days ago. At home, my family was being, let's call it, dynamic. So to get some quiet, I went out and sat outside in my neighbor's yard. Technically, I sat near her front steps. Now, my neighbor is a professional gardener, so you can imagine how beautiful her tiny front yard is. Trees, grasses, flowers, vegetables are all aesthetically arranged. Each is placed exactly where they can best grow, and each is placed where what they put into the soil is exactly what the plant next to them needs. Joanne is a master gardener. And on this particular day, it was a partly sunny day, it was a breezy day, clouds of all different shapes were moving overhead. So you can imagine what the garden looked like. It was just a kaleidoscope of light and shade and color and shape, continuously in motion. And of course, I forgot all about my raucous family. I pulled out my notebook and I tried to describe in writing what I was seeing. But the words that came out were, of course, completely inadequate. I just kept writing the same words over and over again. Light, shadow, color, yellow, green, brown, moving. Light, shadow, color, yellow, green, brown, moving. And it sounds fine when I perform it out loud, but on the page, it just looked completely conventional. And all it conveyed was that I might be striding by in a task-oriented way, striding by an ordinary garden on an ordinary day, noticing the same familiar things out of the corner of my eye. But it wasn't like that at all. So I tried to describe the play of light without using any words related to light at all, without using the words bright or beam or shadow or shimmer or anything like that. Instead, I tried to describe how I felt uplifted when a yellow circle of light suddenly appeared on the ground, or to describe how the breeze tickled my hand when the shadow of a leaf moved, and how the smell of the world changed for just a moment when the wind blew. And then gradually, my whole experience shifted. Instead of attending to the most obvious sensory information, I felt as though I were listening to some kind of underlying symphony where light and wind and life each wove its melody line. And I would certainly call that a spiritual experience. There's even more that I noticed while sitting in Joanne's garden. I looked down, straight down at the plants near my ankles, and I saw skinny, overgrown stalks of grass waving their grains at me. And next to them, low to the ground, was a mishmash of dandelion, clover, and wildflower leaves. Yes, Joanne allows dandelion in her garden, the mother of all lettuce. Keep that in mind. And even lower, below the wildflower leaves, drying grass stalks were turning into new straw. And under the straw, damp, older leaves, reddish brown, were starting to decay into mulch. And bit by bit, chunks were falling off into new soil. And then tiny insects, ants and pill bugs and the occasional spider were working and playing and exploring at every level of the garden. And it occurred to me that this earthy panorama is a perfect metaphor for spirit. Because when spirit manifests and works inside of us, and works isn't even the right word, plays, lives, does its thing, things are always moving and changing and growing and evolving. And each time you shift your attention, you see another layer. And as spirit moves, there is always, always more to notice. There's always more. I tried to use the word more a lot in the last few minutes. Some religious traditions, including the mystical wing of my own tradition, call this wonderful more by the name God. And they say, the more you pay attention, the more you feel, the more you see, the more you know God. Some teachers will even add that you must refer this more to God, and you must pursue these experiences in service to God. Because if you don't, your spiritual practice is selfish. You are only seeking to know more you. But I disagree. And sometimes we rush too quickly to name these experiences with a name of God in our own tradition. And the word God, or Ein Sof, infinity in Jewish tradition, Allah in Islamic tradition, Brahman in some Hindu traditions, cosmic Christ in some Christian traditions. All of these specific names have meaning in a particular context. They get their meaning as part of a theology, part of a social order, part of a philosophy of life. They're connected with a particular set of ritual practices. And if you contextualize your experiences too quickly, sometimes you find yourself only paying attention to the religious context. You might only end up getting to know the system of beliefs and practices about sacred things, as Durkheim puts it. Of course, you might actively be trying to learn a particular context. You might be trying to understand the vocabulary of a particular spiritual tradition and to live into it more fully, to understand what people mean. You might be actively trying to find your place in the social order of a particular community, and these are very important goals. But if you are a seeker in search of the more, you may find that you are not satisfied, and that at some point you will need to be subversive. And you may find yourself looking for a spiritual practice, a ritual, a philosophy that redirects your attention so that you can once again perceive and experience more. And if you do this, it doesn't mean you're selfish. It might mean that you're humble, not ready to claim that you know God just through your personal experience. It might mean that you don't define God only through your experiences. Maybe you don't define God at all. Maybe you're skeptical of any tradition that claims to have the answer. Maybe you believe in what some philosophers call negative theology, that words and practices can only say what God is not, because words are too conventional that we touch during these spiritual experiences. Maybe you think that words can only remind us of how we point toward God. And when you look at things this way, religion is like one finger pointing at the moon. And once you've seen the moon, what is the finger? Thank you. Thanks.